Well, good morning, everybody, and good morning to and welcome to this session number 8 of the Infrastructure Africa. We're going to be talking about the energy transition, and we've got an interesting panel here, and that we've got some folks from South Africa, some folks from other parts of the continent. So we should be able to get a broad continental view. And why is a continental view important? Well, the energy transition is a global issue, and it's really capturing the minds of people in the energy space, wherever you meet them and wherever you talk to them. But the African context is perhaps a little bit different from the context of North America, the context of Europe, because in Africa, energy is not a universal commodity. There are many, many people who don't have access to energy or who can't afford energy. And so the whole context of the African situation is perhaps a little bit different to the other sectors of the world. And therefore, as we talk about pathways to energy transition in Africa, it's going to be important for us to look at it in that context. And we've got people here who have a wealth of experience on the whole question of energy supply, energy availability, energy poverty, energy transition, energy infrastructure. So we're not going to be short of expertise as we go into the discussions. I'm going to ask each panel member to briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the details of the discussion. So I'll start with myself. My name is Brian Statham. I have been in the energy space for far longer than I care to remember. I've been chairman of the South African National Energy Association. I'm an honorary member of that association. I'm also have been on the trustee for the World Energy Council and chair of its studies committee for a number of years. And I'm now an honorary trustee of the World Energy Council as well. So I have a broad interest in energy matters. All right, I'm going to move around. Can I start with you, Titch? Could you just give yourself a brief introduction?
Well, thank you, Brian. So my name is Titch Simbili. I work for the African Union Development Agency, which is the implementing arm of the African Union. And within the AUDA, we are coordinating the implementation of continental flagship programs, such as the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. And for this discussion, we are also coordinating the development of the Continental Power Systems Master Plan, which will identify key generation and transmission infrastructure for the development of an Africa single electricity market. So based on that, I think we'll also be able to bring in some continental, some of the continental initiatives that we are working on that will inform the discussion on Africa's energy transition. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Titch. Prof. Sambo from Nigeria, can you just briefly introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Brian. I'm very glad to be participating in this very important panel. My name is Abubakar Sambo. I am the chairman of the Nigerian chapter of the World Energy Council. I was previously the vice chairman for Africa of the World Energy Council. And in my country, I'm the immediate past Director General of the Energy Commission of Nigeria, which is promoting sustainable use of all the energy resources in the country for both electricity, transport, and even cooking of fuels, all of them.
Yeah, okay, that was a big plate that you were trying to keep spinning in the air there. So much on that, sure. Okay, Vali, can we move to you?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Brian and colleagues, and good morning to the viewers out there. I've, at a high level, have over 40 years experience in the power and energy sector, which includes petrochemical and power, both in the private sector and in the public sector. And I've got significant experience as an executive manager at Eskom Generation, also as Chief Operations Officer at City Power Johannesburg. And my recent assignments are on the strategic advisor to the Association of Municipal Electricity Utilities of Southern Africa. And from an African context, I'm also the executive officer, or like the CEO of PSA, which is the Power Institute of East and Southern Africa. The name is misleading. It's actually all the African utilities on the east and southern coast, east and southern part of Africa, starting from Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, coming along the east coast, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, DRC, and including our Eskom of South Africa. Thank you, Chair, and I'll hand back to you.
Thank you. Niall, would you care to?
Thank you, Brian. I'm Niall Kramer. My background is far too many years in what used to be called Caltex, went and ultimately became Chevron. And from there, I went into Shell. Both of those were in South Africa. The Chevron experience was mostly in Africa and in Southeast Asia and Europe. And I then went to run the industry association, Upstream Industry Association, SAOGA. And I am now solo consulting and going to the game reserve as often as I can.
Sounds like quite a good life. Maurits, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, Brian and team. Just a quick introduction from my side. My name is Maurits Perold. I represent a group called Turnkey Holdings, and our goal is being an EPC company since 2007, where we focus to take the global drive towards net zero emissions for the industry. So we work with various industries, might it be the commercial, industrial, agriculture, mining sector, to be able to achieve the net zero emissions as signed by the Kyoto Protocol and help them to implement the specific visions. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we're going to be talking about the African continent at large, and I was intrigued that when in his introduction, Titch said to us that one of his key roles is to start trying to create an integrated electricity plan for the continent, so that can be the foundation for an electricity market. And it's always been an interesting discussion for me, because we have 50-odd countries on the continent, and they all have independent jurisdictions and independent philosophies. And I've never been sure that you would actually be able to pull them all together and get a common objectives and common viewpoints. So Titch, you've opened my eyes here, and I really would like you to kick off by telling us how this work that you're doing is going to steer us down a pathway towards achieving an energy transition for the continent.
So thank you very much, Brian. Yeah, I think you are right. I mean, it's we've got about 55 countries, 55 countries, which are members of the African Union, and all of them are at different stages of development. Last month they came up with an Africa Common Position on energy access and energy transition, and that is what is guiding the policy framework that will be developed for Africa's transition on the continent. But more importantly, you recall that last year we signed the Continental Free Trade Agreement, and over the years we have been working on various infrastructure projects on the continent through the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. And so our heads of state recognize that for us to be able to develop the energy sector on the continent, and also for us to achieve our socio-economic aspirations, it's important that we should be able to exploit all of the energy resources of the continent. Because some of them, because of the nature, of our energy endowments, they cannot be developed in the context of national demand, but rather in the context of regional as well as a continental markets. So this is why we then embarked on the Continental Power Systems Master Plan, which is essential for the establishment of that Africa Single Electricity Market. And through that Africa Single Electricity Market, we will be able to establish regional electricity markets, which will be integrated into a continental electricity market. And of course, that will enable us to trade power between the power pools, as well as between the continent and the Middle East, Europe, and Asia. So that is the long-term process, but we will break it down into short and medium term, as well as long-term strategic plans.
Okay, but that's now looking at a massive master plan, and I presume that has to go through a lot of approval processes to get accepted and development work and whatnot. Maurits, as a private sector guy, does that get you excited? Does that make you ready to pull your checkbook out and start making investments and get going? I mean,
yes, I think that's a very good question. I think if we look at the talking points, the Ukraine crisis, COVID-19 pandemic, and climate crisis have had enormous impact on the global energy industry. That's the truth. Something that we just found in the past 2 to 3 years, and I think that's relevant to South Africa and the African continent. Let's take COVID, for example. When COVID hit South Africa and Africa, I don't think anybody was ready for it. I don't think anybody were thinking that we're going to go into a lockdown and we're going to have a 2-3 months window where factories, where industries are going to completely go to a complete standstill. We were busy with various projects in South Africa and up in Africa where we had to bring our teams back from the African continent and also stop on various sites in South Africa. So that set us back on various projects. Then what happened was when systematically the COVID pandemic started shifting more to a positive note, the industry systematically started happening. But then what happened simultaneously, we started looking at the Ukrainian war. And what is that impact? That impact is where the power crisis is currently the biggest impact for the South African and African continent, which I feel everybody's not taking that seriously as yet. Being in the industry, I'm just going to give you an example. Currently, if we look at the intervals of, for argument's sake, solar panels, inverters, battery technology coming into South Africa, we've got a 4 to 6 months delay. That didn't even happen in COVID times. Even if it was COVID, stock still arrived. We just couldn't continue on certain sites because the sites was completely closed down due to COVID. But now we're feeling the net effect what's happening in Europe. And the reason behind that is that I'm saying it with all due respect, is that the European countries was in such an arrogant mindset that they never thought that through the Ukrainian war, through what Putin is doing, that he's going to actually start, basically closing down their energy sources, going to start closing down their gas. We work very closely with the international companies like the likes of Siemens. Currently, Germany is in a power crisis and is taking a big portion of the products which we utilize. Now all of a sudden, we're second in row, where we normally got a 4 to 6 week turnaround time to get products in the country. Now it becomes 8 weeks, now it becomes 12 weeks, now it becomes 3, 4, 5 months. So this is now the net on effect that we're feeling past the pandemic. So it's not just the pandemic that slowed down the growth of infrastructure around renewables in South Africa and Africa, but the war in Ukraine has directly influenced us in the market. The advantage that we've seen from a EPC side or from a solar side is the demand. So the demand is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we can't actually keep up with the demand. Recently, what happened again in South Africa, and I think everybody's aware about it, is the load shedding we had, but we had a lot of inconsistent load shedding, which is similar to the African continent. Since October last year, certain regions of South Africa was sitting without electricity, not for hours, but for months. There was a big portion of one of the cities in Swane, which is Pretoria in South Africa, one of our biggest municipality, where an entire section of the municipality was sitting without electricity for 4 months. So the important aspect is we need to start looking at the energy mix, as we like to call it, to be able to say what is available on the African continent and start locking that in. 2007, for argument's sake, we were running a very successful project where we built the first fully integrated solar PV module manufacturing plant in South Africa, to be able to have PV manufacturing in South Africa, so we don't have to import from overseas markets, we don't have the influences of exchange rates, but we actually got stock available. So if we need to start putting infrastructure in place, we can start doing it immediately. But now our hands are tied. We have to wait for the international markets because we got nothing available in South Africa. So we need to import from a global market to be able to give us access to any energy. And that's getting more and more, my personal opinion, the nature of the business is that we're standing in a queue waiting for technology to be delivered to the various countries. So we need to take control of the product offerings and the solutions that's available and start revisiting what we tried to do a couple of years ago, and to say that we're now in a position that we don't really have a choice. So we need to start getting these facilities off the ground again. We need to see where there's pockets of gas available in Mozambique and align ourselves in Mozambique and see how much of that gas we can get available. We need to look up in Africa and look at what other resources we can pack together and be able to share with the rest of the continent than rather to sell it offshore. So that's just my personal opinion.
I want to move then immediately to hear what Prof has to say, because he's sitting on huge pockets of gas, and that's a massive country. And I'm wondering how you guys see it in Nigeria.
Yes, thank you, Brian. This is a very relevant question at this stage. Of course, you know, Nigeria is even more of a gas country than oil. And our reserve is proven reserve, more than 200 trillion standard cubic feet. And the one that the government is trying to confirm is up to 600 trillion standard cubic feet of gas. And at the moment, the government spearheaded many other African, in fact, 14 other African countries who have oil and gas to plead that we should have a just energy transition to allow us to use the slightly cleaner gas, and not to talk of coal at all, and even diesel, to stop diesel utilization, just gas and the renewables. And we are very happy to say that the European Union has accepted gas as a transition fuel. And now funding is coming in that direction. And as we are talking in this meeting, a few weeks back, one of the African Union decisions that was taken much more than 10, 15 years ago, that was not taken very seriously, it has all of a sudden been activated. This is the North African gas pipeline to take gas from Nigeria through Niger to Algeria, so that African countries in the North Africa, in Sahel Africa, and then even to Europe through Italy, that was concretized. The Algerian government officials came to Nigeria to conclude on that project. And at the same time, Morocco came to Nigeria to take gas westward through Morocco to Spain and also to Europe. So the Ukraine-Russia war is making this long decided project that were in comatose state to all of a sudden be reactivated. So the market in that will be captured. And within the country, we have decided to build more gas power plants and then to even use gas in transportation sector. There's this compressed natural gas fitting into automobiles, and is moving, of course, a little bit slowly. And because of all this, Nigerian government says it cannot meet the 2030 SDG agenda, but it has pledged at the Glasgow Climate Change Conference that the net zero will be met in 2060 in general, but for gas, it will be in 2040. So I am glad to say that regarding the first project that I mentioned, the North African gas pipeline, that was even started before the Ukraine war. About a year ago, June actually, last year, the government kick-started the project. The project was launched. It has started to take gas from Niger Delta to Abuja, to Kaduna, to Kano. Kano is in the northern part of Nigeria, ready for taking the gas to, like I said, Niger, and then to Algeria, and then to Italy. So the issue is being given.
Prof, I have to interrupt you because this raises all sorts of alarm bells for me. We're talking about a just transition in energy for Africa, and here what's happening is that all that energy that you guys have got is going northward to the Mediterranean countries, which have by and large close to, if not already, 100% energy access in their populations, and then is going to cross into Europe, the thirsty Europe. And meanwhile, sub-Saharan Africa, which is sitting at 30% access, is not seeing any benefits from that.
Well, maybe I did not explain well enough, but when the first project was launched last year, is to build industries in Nigeria utilizing gas. And then when the gas pipeline is going westwards, is going to pass through Benin Republic, Togo, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, Morocco. All these countries are going to benefit. And when it goes northwards, Niger and Chad will benefit, then Algeria. And then, of course, we need to make money. Right now, we are depending solely on the income on sale of oil and gas to run our country. And what we are planning to do now is to massively enlarge the sources of revenue. We need the funding to be able to do that, to go into agriculture, large-scale agriculture, including mechanized agriculture, to go into mining and mineral processing, and to go into a few manufacturing hubs where we have comparative advantage as well.
Okay, thanks, Prof. Niall, you're also in the oil and gas sector. How's this playing out for you? What's your views?
The way I see it is that the future of oil is gas. And the talk of a just transition, which has been around for, I would call it at least 5 years now, is nothing special. The world has always been in an energy transition, whether that's from horse manure to coal, or the switch from coal to diesel in the World War II, and later to nuclear and so on. There have been many, many transitions, and the transition is going to be ongoing. It's not as if we are just about to arrive at some Paris-determined final state. It will be an ongoing thing. The way I see it is that the Ukraine war especially has created, provided an opportunity, not just for markets, which I'm hearing the paradox in what you and Professor Abubakar have been talking about, but it also foregrounds the issue of how much oil and gas Africa actually has under the ground. And I'm surprised at the scale of what Abubakar was saying about 200 to 600 TCF in Nigeria. I would have called the total Africa 620 TCF, but that is huge in terms of gas opportunity. The paradox, though, is that that gas is not being used in Africa, and the plans they seem to be outward focusing entirely, rather than tagging into the African demand with the youngest, rising population in desperate need of energy. That's the first part of what I see. The other is that we need to get a better understanding on what is meant by a just transition. I think it is becoming a bit of a cliche, and broadly everyone sort of understands that it's just in terms of the climate, and that we, will move to less polluting fuels over time, and the transition is basically from coal and oil through to renewables and gas, and I'm including gas, as Professor Abubakar did as part of a green definition there. The danger in that I see is that we don't all have a shared definition around what a just transition is. And I think it's becoming a competing, or an area of competition, a contested space. Especially, and I noticed it here in South Africa, that the talk of the move from the coal fields and Mpumalanga area, and the need that the power that the unions hold over jobs in that area, and the massive reluctance that I see within government, not within the speeches that are made at the very top end, but within the infrastructure, within the systems. There's a systemic inertia to move away from fine speeches, which we've had for God knows how long. But the action is not flowing through, and when it does, it becomes contested again and again. So overall, I mean, there's no question that we have to move to new renewables, but where we do it, at what pace, and through what sorts of agencies is another matter altogether.
Okay, thanks. Now I'm going to move from you. I'm going to ask Vali to come in, because Vali said he was representing through PIESA the countries of Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, down through Mozambique, and some of those. And these are countries that are doing interesting things in trying to improve their energy access, but certainly don't appear to be countries that are going to benefit from these grand export schemes. So, Vali, where would you like to come in and comment a bit? Vali, you're on mute. If you can just unmute your mic.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks, Chair. I think I wouldn't talk specifics with respect to those different countries, because, as you know, all 55 countries are doing different things, but hopefully with a common goal. So we have the same situation with the PIESA membership countries in the main. The technology split between, say, starting from Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, coming down south, is also different. So you have hydro, gas to a certain extent, and then coming down extreme south, we have solar. Okay, so I think all of and of course, not forgetting Kenya, we've got geothermal, right? So all those countries are leveraging on their strengths, technology-wise, and trying to extract as much energy as they can for their respective benefits. But yes, I think it's good to. I'm just kind of being biased slightly towards the electricity side. So besides the eating and all of that, HEATING, there's a big drive towards, obviously, electrification. And so the conundrum is you can generate the electron from the primary energy, whether it's gas, solar, geothermal, but you need to evacuate it. So you need to evacuate the electrons. Now, I think that's where the challenge is, especially in the PSR countries, but I would argue in other countries as well. Maybe South Africa is a bit more elaborate in that respect. So we don't have the grid infrastructure, the national grid infrastructure to evacuate that. Broadly speaking, in Africa, except for a few countries like Nigeria, South Africa, etc. So from an infrastructure perspective, and maybe we can take a leaf from the telco industry, where we focus on microgrids as a means to evacuate the electron, bearing in mind that there's about 600 to 700 million people, I think, that still don't have access to power, and that needs to be a priority in any just energy transition scenario. And we've said as a PSR and even AMEU that we will have a uniquely driven African jet strategy. We'll piggyback on the European and other Western experiences, Asian experiences, but we've got to have a uniquely African driven. And I like the point you raised that energy as a commodity is not uniform or homogeneous across Africa. So that brings with it all these challenges. But I think we need to beneficiate the primary energy, the commodity that we've got from the ground, and keep it local. I'm also hoping, Brian, you and I with ESCOM, when we talked about the Grand Inga project, and we said if we can powerize Inga, we can supply the whole of Africa plus 20% of Europe. So there's an opportunity, maybe as part of the just energy transition, to bring that in. But I think strategically, I think Africa has a wealth of primary energy resources. We are being pressurized, and I say this with the utmost respect, to fast track the jet strategy. But I made the point about the trade-offs. So from an African perspective, I think there's going to be a lot more trade-offs than what we see in the rest of the world. Maybe Asia is close to us from that. I think this is where we could also leverage the benefits of being part of the BRICS scenario. And so in terms of the trade-offs, there has to be a balance, because we cannot allow hungry mouths to continue to be hungry. We cannot sacrifice energy democratization, energy poverty. In Africa, even in South Africa, we have majority poor people than other continents. The inequality gap is increasing. Poverty is increasing. The youth unemployment is increasing. I can talk from a South African perspective. And we cannot allow that to progress because the population would not allow for that, the majority of the population. So I think we need to be careful that when we're implementing JET, I'm a firm supporter of JET, but I call it the balanced JET. And I think the point from Neil Kramer, we're going to be careful. And my final point before I hand back to you is that we have essentially three scenarios, say from an African perspective. We have the typical ET, energy transition, where we as engineers say, hey, we just replace all the fossil stuff with low carbon or clean energy stuff, and that's not it. And then if I take South Africa as an example, we're in the midst of decommissioning a number of fossil-fired power stations. Sometimes I get worried when there's argument made to fast track that. We're going to be careful of dispatchable loads. But yeah, when we decommissioning those, we're going to be careful. This is when the JET comes in, the just energy transition comes in, where we must be careful that we do not throw away the baby away with the bathwater, meaning that we do not let people who are employees of those power stations, fossil stations, to be left in the lurch, because we've got significant number. And then from a final point, maybe talking from the municipal end, I call it the transformative JET. So it's the TJET. So besides looking after business and commercial from a JET perspective, we must not forget the wider community, where the communities where you're living. So,
and in the context of the community, Valley, and I'm going to come to you, Marit, you've worked in setting up microgrids and mini grids in community-based systems. How patient are the communities going to be while we carry on with all this policy making and grand talking and schemes and all the rest of it? And when are the community going to say enough's enough? And, I've had no access to energy, so really climate change is not the issue for me. I'm more worried about just getting my hands on some energy. And do you think we've got time to do the right thing, or do you think we're going to have to go through a staged process of first getting the energy and then to the people, and then gradually making it cleaner and cleaner as we go along? How do you see it unfolding?
is that for me, Brian? Yeah.
No, it's for Marit.
Okay, Marit. Okay.
Brian, what I've seen in the industry is that the need is just getting greater and greater. And what we do from the private sector is that what we found is basically just to step in and start building these mini grids. Since COVID, we were actually building mini grids in COVID time, because you can't wait until some process of the government gets fast-tracked for you to be able to start off these certain projects. So what we've done is that we've ring-fenced a lot of these projects to get them off the ground, because rightfully said, what do you do if you sit without electricity? What if you sit for 2, 3, 4 months without electricity? You need to act. So that's what we started doing throughout the process, is that we tailor-make the solutions, we create a mini grids, and we just start installing and try to work as close as possible with the government to say, there's a lot of things they've done right throughout the years. There's a lot of programs that we forgot about that was very successful, which I felt that was catalyst to drive a lot of these renewable energy processes throughout the years. 2007, 2008, when we as South Africa for the first time experienced load shedding or blackouts, very quickly the government and Eskom decided, let's look at the rebate scheme. Let's look at solar water heating for a start. That started progressing into the solar industry to say to the manufacturing industry, any manufacturing industry that manufactures anything or local assembling, if you invest in a solar solution or try to lower your power consumption, we will contribute a percentage to the total capex which you invest. SARS came to the table a couple of years ago to say if you install a solar solution, we'll write it off 100%. The president announced at the end of last year, there's no red tape. If you want to go build a 100 megawatt solar farm for yourself to provide electricity for yourself, there's no red tape. So from a government perspective versus the private sector, they're working very closely to be able to see how they can expedite the process. Like I just said previously, where the bottleneck come in, or the logistics, is the vast demand the European market is experiencing. I had to chat with the group CEO of Daimler a couple of weeks ago, and I've asked him, Frank, I said, did you think you would ever go into a power crisis? They said no. So they weren't expecting this to happen. So now all of a sudden they've got an entire mind shift, and 70% of the orders that we place that comes to South Africa, that orders are stuck now in Europe, which they utilize and try to use to their advantage. So where the opportunities are lying, in my personal opinion, is to revisit what we started doing in 2007. We started building our own PV plants. We started looking at investing on our own lead acid battery plants, and we need to revisit it to be able to see what's available on our continent and in South Africa, how we can utilize that technologies, and we don't have to wait for lengthy processes to get these projects off the ground, because the need is now, not over a month's time or 6 months' time. The need can be addressed immediately.
Yeah, and Prof, you've worked closely with government policymakers in Nigeria, but you've also, as part of the World Energy Council, you've been heavily involved in trying to look at energy access issues across the continent. How do you see this playing out? Do you also feel we're going to have to start thinking local and acting local and doing local, or what's your plan?
Yes, Brian, this is a very good question. I believe what we've been talking at the World Energy Council, and what I know African Union has also been promoting, is that we need to be more serious in cooperating together. What I mean, I just had mention of the great Grand Inga, and the regional power pools are there. Once we have this type of projects, Grand Inga, all parts of the continent to benefit through the regional power pools. And then on the other side, we have also the electricity networks, the gas pipeline and the oil pipelines also around the country, around the continent. And if we do that, along with the local production within the continent, not in every country, in key countries that have got the capacity to produce power components, then we will share not only the resources, but some of the products amongst African countries, and even, like I said earlier, to export some outside the continent. And this, I see, is something that can be achieved. But of course, at the beginning, it will look like there will be some contradiction. But I see there's no contradiction per se, that when we say we want to move, not a sharp change, but a gradual change with energy mix that is relatively cleaner, like I said, gas instead of coal and diesel, gas and then renewables. Then as the years go by, we start reducing the gas and increasing the renewables. I think this will be a better transition pathway for the continent.
Which leads me to come to Tish again. And, Tish, you're talking about trying to create the infrastructure for a power market across the continent. But you make comment about the free trade agreement that we've got. And I'm wondering whether your time would not be better spent looking at the manufacturing sectors and saying, because we know that a lot of these countries, the markets are too small to justify their own manufacturing capability. Yeah. So it might be better to be saying, okay, well, Kenya, you guys specialize in wind turbine blades, and Nigeria, you specialize in pipelines, and somebody else specializes in solar panels and things like that, and start becoming the nodal points for manufacturing to supply an African market, rather than competing and then none of them getting off the ground because their local markets are all too small to justify the development. Does that resonate at all, or am I smoking my socks?
No, it does indeed, Brian. It resonates. So what we have done is that we are doing an assessment of the resource endowments of each of our member states, so that we can then see what their strategic advantage is in terms of what they can supply in energy, but also we have mentioned earlier on in terms of beneficiation and manufacturing, what they can actually use as their competitive advantage in terms of manufacturing. However, that if you look at for them to be able to exploit those opportunities, they cannot do it without a reliable supply of energy. And if you look at all of the countries that have industrialized, if I could use South Africa, for example, from the 70s, the compound annual growth rate in terms of the power generation capacity was about 19% annually from the 70s up to the 90s. And that enabled South Africa to really grow its economy and diversify its economy. But if you contrast that with Nigeria, for example, which is endowed with a lot of gas and as well as petroleum, if we are to develop a robust petroleum industry within Nigeria, because those are the resources that they have, you really need to ramp up investment in the power generation capacity of the country for them to be able to then fully utilize that potential that they have. So without addressing that energy supply and making it reliable, we will not be able to exploit the manufacturing potential of all of our member states. So it's very critical that the energy supply component has to be addressed as well.
Okay, but I'm going to move to Niall now, because I'm wondering whether we're talking about an electricity master plan for the continent. Should we not also be talking about a gas master plan for the continent too?
I'm a little, there's a paradox here. I'm not a big fan of master plans and, the big solution. I think Africa has proved time and again through, for example, West African pipelines, the plan has been there for so long. There's been talk of a pipeline from northern Mozambique right down to South Africa. The idea of a big ESCOM, now we're talking about another utility. I take Maurizio's point that start small and put lots of small solutions actually where there is demand and where where the customers are going to actually be paying for it and make the investment viable. One of the reasons I think that Africa has failed, besides inept government and corruption and all of the typical issues, is that we just don't have an attractive policy framework in many places. Of course, there are some exceptions, but in many places we don't have an attractive policy framework that makes it interesting for the investors who've got the balance sheets, the expertise, the know-how to come in and put in this large-scale infrastructure. So I'm more in favor of flexibility. I'm not mad about pipelines with a fixed customer, fixed direction, often through unstable, contested territory. And there are so many more transport solutions now for gas. And I'm stressing gas because I think it's absolutely clear that the demand for gas globally is going up and up and up. And the transport solutions with cryogenic containers, shipping through rail, and that's another infrastructure opportunity here. I think we need to be thinking more on a smaller, more realistic, time-bound scale where there is an attractive opportunity. And if that is not working out, that flexible infrastructure like a cryogenic tank can just move off elsewhere. There were earlier some touching on local content in discussion. And there is one point I want to make about that, is that we do have to be pragmatic. It cannot be just kind of disguised nationalism where we're just building for ourselves. And the most important local content that anyone can produce is local oil or gas out of local ground. After that, the rest could follow. But trying to build a grand master plan ahead of getting the oil or the gas out of the ground and being produced, I think is unrealistic. So in the interim, I'm a fan of more small scale solutions. I want to add one other point though, and that is in this idea of a just transition, we have to just be realistic around what the current applications are for petrochemical products that come out of refineries. And in any of the rooms that any of us are sitting in now, we could look around and find hundreds of products, including the products that we're talking to each other through, that are a direct result of those petrochemical industries. And the future of those industries is definitely going to have a massive petrochemical element. And the just transition needs to start thinking about not just energy, but all of the byproducts, the bitumen, the plastics, the medical elements, the electronic elements that come out of there.
Sure. Guys, I think we could go on for another couple of hours here and having this discussion, but unfortunately we're running out of time. And I think as I try and sum up, which I'm not going to try and sum up, I think that's an impossible task. But I think what has come out for me is that Africa as a continent needs its own definition and its own narrative of what it means by a just energy transition. We have talked here today in this hour, we've had a lot of focus on the need to get energy to the population, the need to enable people to have access. And we've flitted between coal moving out, gas coming in as a transition fuel. We've talked about the need for renewables in the form of hydro, in terms of solar, wind. We haven't even touched on biofuels and things like that. And I think this is going to be so important as we go forward, that Africa takes its unique position in terms of what it means by a just energy transition, and then gets visionaries to drive that. People who can tell the narrative, people who can motivate the narrative, people who can get people on board with the narrative. Because I think that Africans, by and large, have a tremendous capacity for doing things small and local that are in their own best interests and getting incredibly innovative in terms of finding solutions in the absence of massive projects, in the absence of massive policy frameworks, but just rolling up their sleeves, putting a spade in the ground or a piece of wire across the ground and getting on with it and making things happen. And we need to harness that creativity and that energy of people to ensure that we can get the energy transition that we need for Africa. And people will inherently look after themselves and make things right. And Prof, you've got your hand raised. Is there something you want to add to that concluding remark?
Yes, Brian, I just want to emphasize that while at the moment we are sharing some energy resources with other countries, we got gas pipeline, we got also electricity networks. Even despite our energy poverty in Nigeria, we are still sharing electricity with Niger and Benin Republic and Togo. And our gas is going again, Benin, Togo, up to Ghana. So it is not that there is nothing like these gas pipelines or regional power pool. No, they are there. What I was saying earlier is we should improve upon this in line with the African Union decision long time ago. It's not that nothing is happening, something is happening. I think I should make this point.
Okay.
We should not close by saying it should be only the small plants. Small plants will not enable sharing of resources amongst brotherly African countries.
Thanks, Prof. Okay, so as we wrap up, I hope we've left the delegates, and I hope there are still some delegates listening to us, if we haven't bored them all, I hope we've inspired you, because what I've heard from all the panel members here today is passion, enthusiasm, drive, energy, a desire to get out there and make things happen. And I hope that you as the delegates will walk away from this panel as you now break away for a networking session and some refreshment, that you will look to think about how can you make a difference? How can you do something in your neck of the woods, and try and strike alliances with other colleagues here at this conference so that you can build those alliances and start delivering energy to all the people of the continent, but in a way that is fair, in a way that is just, in a way that elevates everybody's capability to live to their own and true potential. And I thank you very much. I want to thank all my panel members for the contribution that they've made. And I want to thank all the delegates for joining us for this session. And with that, I close the session and hope you enjoy your networking break.